remember some of the things that we did. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing what we were talking about. So let's see what we were doing. We were pretty much within this portion right there. So this portion from ثم بعثنا من بعدهم موسى بآياتنا إلى فرعون وملئه, and then we kind of did a surface translation, really quick surface translation, and we stopped right there. This is the whole idea, was really to make sure that we have a coherent group of ayat, that we want to make sure that we pretty much have a story that can give us at least a good, let's call it a good chapter of the story. That way we won't feel that we're breaking it too much. So that's what we basically did as a surface tafsir. But we still didn't do the part about the part about the detailed tafsir from Tafsir al-Qurtubi, which we definitely needed to do because, of course, it's so easy to get carried away from what the Mufassirin had said. So we wanted to make sure that the Mufassirin themselves, they basically go over those ayat and make sure that we have also had a foundation of what they had said in regards to tafsir. So we needed to look into that one. All right. And that's why we went to Tafsir al-Qurtubi. But there were a couple things that I had certain people actually contact me. And one of them, it wasn't just one person, but it was a number of different people that wanted me to talk more about fitra. And certainly there's always going to be a lot to talk about in regards to fitra, but it would be really interesting to just remember a couple things that we can see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created within our fitra, in the way that people were living before. So we're talking about our ancestors. The way that they were living was definitely making them healthier, whether we're speaking about the way that they consume their foods, their healthy lifestyles, their social lifestyles, their connections with one another. All of that is just letting us know that once we had invented new ways to separate ourselves, whether from the things that we find in nature or whether the things we find in our social relations. And we are definitely told that whenever you're not comfortable with something, just pull out, and what you're supposed to be looking for is more and more and more comfort. And now we're starting to see these studies that are basically telling us that the area of your comfort is usually the area of what may bring in an unhealthy lifestyle, dangerous zones that may actually come after you and may definitely snap in your face without you realizing. So we're looking at studies that are letting us know that that it's time that we recognize what is affecting, whether we're speaking about more depression, we're speaking about even physical illnesses, all these different things. Now they're letting us know that it is part of our fitra. And certainly now they're encouraging that all the time, to spend more time outdoors, get more sunlight, walk rather than constantly sitting, being around nature and animals. This interesting study that was talking about that if you were to go outside and actually see 14 birds and more, that would be equivalent to an antidepressant medication. That was really interesting to see. So having periods of quiet and solitude, just a time without any any phones or any noises or any distractions, and certainly natural sleep, sleeping when it gets dark and walking relatively early, getting morning sunlight, not staying awake for hours, staring at a bright screen or having a constant day or a night rhythm, and also eating naturally. We're talking about eating real meals, of course, avoiding processed foods, eating when genuinely hungry rather than constantly snacking, and not consuming enormous quantities of sugar, drinking water as the primary drink, and eating slowly and stopping before being excessively full. So that was actually one thing that the Prophet ﷺ actually emphasized on. Natural movement, whether it's walking frequently, squatting, this one is definitely needing a lot of homework to do. That squatting piece is really hard. And bending and getting up from the ground. How do you get up from the ground and all of that? Sitting probably on the floor rather than sitting up higher. That way you can force yourself to work out those muscles and the hamstrings and all of those. And certainly carrying things around rather than wanting everything to be lightweight and all of that. So learning how to carry things around and making sure that you use your body, that's basically enhancing your joints, enhancing your muscles, and certainly even healthy for your bones as well. Using your body throughout the day instead of sitting 8 to 12 hours. And certainly a very important thing, which is hygiene. We're talking about hygiene, whether personal cleansing or cleaning. Well, personal hygiene, let's just use that word. Okay, in associating that with fitra, we do see that hadith about removing pubic hair, underarm hair, trimming the mustache, cutting the nails, circumcision, using miswak. You know, the irony is how a lot of feminist women, in regards to moving underarm hair, they're right now considering it that you're doing it for men, and that they're wanting to grow their underarm hair because they are basically saying that it is more feminine, and that they don't want a man telling them what to do or all of that. But it's actually the sunnah for both men and women to remove the underarm hair, and certainly trimming mustache, cutting nails, circumcision, and so forth. And certainly we do have these hadith that do emphasize on that. Natural modesty is something that rarely is seen and associated with fitra. And modern Western culture can make constant exposure of the body seem completely ordinary, and that fitra, as the fitra of dressing and being modest, as something that is traditional, old-fashioned, but it was actually associated with fitra. In the ahadith, we can see that the ahadith emphasizing on haya, or bashfulness, modesty, dignity, and covering as something that is actually the fitra itself. So in other words, wearing hijab for women, that's actually her fitra to cover up. Or even things like growing beard, that's the fitra for what it means to be masculine. Or even, there's another thing that I would say is probably rarely talked about, the word الرجال قوامون على النساء. When you look at الرجال قوامون على النساء, there is actually a hidden sign of a fitra there. Let me just break it down. So when you look at الرجال, men are قوامون, which basically means, it can mean supporters. It can also mean in authority. It could also mean superior. It can have all these meanings, okay? But that doesn't mean if they are supporters, or they are all, it doesn't necessarily mean all these meanings. So if somebody might say, well, hey, look, you just said superior, and therefore women are inferior. Absolutely not. No one ever says that men are superior to mean that women are inferior whatsoever. But I'm just talking about the word itself. And then we would have to go back to the hadith, and we would have to go back to the description that the Prophet ﷺ had described the relationship and what it should look like in order to fully understand what does the word qawamun really mean. All right. So when we look at the word الرجال قوامون على النساء, there is a fitra side, a fitra piece in this ayah when it basically says that it is part of basically men's nature or men's instinct that they want to be qawamun. He wants to be a masculine, to mean that he wants to be an authority, to mean he wants to be the supporter, to mean that he wants to be the person that is also, let's say, the one to put structure within the household. Okay, let's say the one to be the leader. All right, that's what the word qawamun means. On the other hand, it is part of a woman's nature that she wants to feel that you are really this man that is leading the household, that is supporting the household, that is putting the structure for the household. But certainly this isn't to make it in a way that you are somehow superior, to mean that she's inferior, to mean that you are putting her down. That is definitely not something that you will find in any hadith or in any ayah giving me that meaning whatsoever. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ in numerous hadith had emphasized that it is part of the fitrah, and basically just like the hadith that explain it to us, that خيركم خيركم لنساء, that the best of you are the best to their wives, the best to their women, that is. And at the same time, you would see a hadith that are scolding. And I would say scolding because it is very common that men may get into, let's say, this kind of belittling the wife throughout the day, and then at the end of the night expecting her to be available in intimacy. And certainly the Prophet ﷺ described the person that wants to live in such a way as nothing but similar to a mule. And this is very important, that this is not humane. When you say that this is like a mule, that's another way of saying that this is not humane. This is not something that is part of the fitrah. Maybe a man's fitrah is fine with getting in a fight throughout the day, or probably join a battle throughout the day because their chemistry works differently. And then at the end of the night, okay, I'm ready. Maybe their body is functioned to do that, but not a woman's body. A woman's body throughout the day, it takes a lot to actually prepare it. So just seeing all of that is letting us know that Islam is actually the religion of fitrah. Just give me 1 second. With all the landscaping outside, it just feels like you're sitting in some kind of a, I don't know, some kind of a industrial place. All right, let's see. So just to mention these pieces of fitrah, I think is extremely important, because we seem to have gotten carried away with how to understand what is supposed to be fitrah. How do we relate to whether men and women, or how we relate to nature itself? How do we relate with our bodies? You know, there's another side of fitrah, which is the part about family and community. Of course, you know, right now with all this this life where you're working a certain amount of hours, you're usually, and especially even with this working virtually. So now you're not only alone, but you're alone for an amount of hours, an amount of time that is unprecedented. And certainly humans need that connection, and it is part of their fitra or part of their nature. So they need the family around them, the neighbors, the friends, the elders, the children, the face-to-face conversation. And certainly you could see, there's one thing is that many times, I used to do that hotline type of fatwa. So it was a hotline fatwa. It was in the US and Canada, and people would call in order to basically seek a fatwa or complain about their problems or etc. And I was basically working with that organization for almost 2 years. But anyhow, I had to stop. It was becoming too much because it was taking a lot of my time. Okay, now, one thing that I was probably getting as the most phone calls that were coming to me is younger women, and specifically women. I would get phone calls, men and women, but it depends on who's calling. But it was mainly women that were calling. I mean, I can understand, they wanted something that was available, and also something that was something, I guess, that wasn't face to face. Men would go to the masjid and find their answers basically face to face and speak with the imam right there. So women needed this hotline. Anyhow, so I used to get a lot of women calling me, and younger women that always wanted to separate from their families because her mother was, according to her, is nothing but a narcissist or toxic. Her father is also the same. Their siblings are also too toxic, and that the therapists would recommend them to move out. And considered and told them that that was healthier for them, that that's basically for their mental health, that that's what better for them, etc. And subhanallah, whenever you would see that these therapists are starting to give these types of advice. And the sad thing is that the ones that are calling usually assumed that a therapist is basically supposed to be giving us these prescriptions, and that I'm supposed to be giving a fatwa based on what a therapist might say or based on what a therapist might recommend. And certainly that's not what Islam would say. Islam would be in total objection to isolating yourself from your parents, from your siblings, from your family, because that is not actually healthy for you. It might be seen at just temporarily that, oh, finally, I'm relaxed. And without you realizing, that's actually going to reduce your social skills. That's going to reduce your fitra from basically having that grounding and that bond. And in fact, the hadith are really clear about warning from men and women. By the way, it's not just women, but men and women from living alone. There are actually a number of different hadith that actually warn about living alone and being basically away from family. And that's letting us know that this is not fitrah. Even if a therapist might recommend that as a way to help you get into your comfort zone, to make you healthy and all of that, we would object as basically coming from the Quran and Sunnah, which would give us the best therapy to tell us, no, learning how to hold your temper, learning how to work out this relationship and work out your skills in dealing with these triggers is actually better for you than thinking that move out and running out, because moving out and running out, it may feel comfortable for a certain amount of time, for a certain, temporarily, but down the road, that's not what your fitrah was designed to live in. You will find yourself going from one problem to another bigger problem, which probably will even make your anxiety worse, maybe depression, maybe who knows what, and probably even going suicidal. So what a therapist should be doing is probably giving tips on how to deal with family, how to deal with probably a mother that might to her appear controlling, but it's probably the mother wanting to keep her daughter safer. Yes, sometimes the mothers can get overboard with how they probably think that this is making sure that they are secure and secure, but certainly we can see that our parents, our grandparents did not put in this amount of exaggerated security that our mothers might have done, and we are doing it to our children. We're probably maybe facing a lot more dangers than before, but certainly we can see that our ancestors were always pushing their children out into nature, into danger, in order to learn from it, in order to strengthen their abilities and strengthen their recognition where danger lies, in order to make sure that they build that empowerment. Yet, unfortunately, in a society that many of the younger generation grew up in, mom puts the breakfast for them, mom picks up their trash, mom picks up everything for them, mom fixes their room, mom does everything for them, and they become so entitled that once they go out to basically become fathers or mothers or whatever it is, they're expecting someone else to do it for them. And of course, the ahadith are letting us know that it is part of the fitrah. For example, to clean your house, to clean outside of your, and فَنَظِّفُوا أَفْنِيَتِكُمْ, and clean out, for example, the yard, clean out the outdoors, clean out your body, etc. So all of that was actually something that we find the hadith encouraging us, meaning to let us know that it is actually part of your fitrah. It would be really interesting to look at whatever you read in hadith or whatever you read in Quran and Sunnah, to also look at it from, well, what inference is it giving me to teach me more about what it means to be human? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human basically means, what is my fitrah? What is my fitrah basically means understanding the human psyche, understanding what it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created me in a certain way. And certainly when you look at the hadith, for example, ordering us to be patient in those social circles. In fact, the hadith are really clear to let us know that being patient and gathering and joining people and being social is way better than isolating yourself from the society. Even though you might be isolating yourself for probably a reason that I'm just trying to rejuvenate, I'm just trying to be comfortable, this is triggering my anger, this is triggering my attitude, whatever it is. But then what the Prophet ﷺ was telling us, that is sabr ala adhan nas, and having that patience on the harm that people might do to you is actually better than being in that solitude area, and then solitude and being and reducing your social relations. But sabr ala al-adha is way better. Having that patience on the harm that they might inflict upon you is way better than somehow isolating yourself from everyone. Okay, and certainly when we're speaking about person to person, what we need to learn is how to deal with our anger, how to do that temper management, how to communicate, and how to learn. And I would say grandmothers, grandmothers right now, many would think that they're just an additional number in the family, but grandmothers in their contribution is actually very healthy, because what a grandmother does is, one, she's a person that connects to you from history, and she's connecting you in ways to, one, take out, and I would say grandmothers, they absorb all that anger. They absorb all that anger by coming to you from your future to let you know it's okay. In other words, I've seen this before. They're just going to grow one day. They're going to learn. And she's this person that will, I would say, reduce that anger, and she'll be the one to absorb all that anger when it goes all hyped. Whether from the mother, that is basically the mother that's dealing with this, or even the children. She'll be this outside person, yet she's inside, and she'll be there to talk to the children, to give them these wisdoms, and to give also the husband certain wisdoms. Certainly, somebody might say, well, wait a minute, no, that's basically my mother-in-law interfering in my space and all of that. I'm not necessarily saying that it's part of your fitrah to have your mother-in-law living with you. In fact, all scholars would agree that you have your right to have your personal space where no one else is sharing it with you. There's no question about that. No question about that whatsoever. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, you have to bring somebody to share your space with you, but at least, whether it's your mother-in-law or whether it's your own mother, but I'm saying at least frequent interaction is extremely important, because as much as you probably did not like it, think of it as exactly like that broccoli or exactly like that vegetable compared to a donut. You may not be very happy eating maybe this vegetable, but you know that it is full of nutrients. And that's one thing, is that what we're missing out on is that wisdom that the elders might contribute in our children's lives and in our lives. Another thing that I would like to say is using your hands. Using your hands as part of fitrah, cooking, cleaning, gardening, repairing things, making things, basically, and doing physical work are very different from spending the entire day just consuming information throughout the screen. So and there are all these studies that are letting us know that just cooking a meal, whenever you are cooking or doing something, that it is basically giving you a healthier brain, and simply enhancing your brain and keeping you healthy, and basically to keep you away from dementia, and certainly other Alzheimer's and other diseases. And why? Because you're keeping your brain active. When you're cooking, you're planning what to do, you're putting a certain order, you're basically putting all that investment, you're keeping your brain active. Think of it as, if you're not activating your brain, it's just going to go rusty, and then it's going to start malfunctioning. Think of it as this part of the brain basically rotting if you're not doing any of that. So when you're cleaning, gardening, repairing things, doing all of that physical work, it will keep your brain active, and it will make your brain healthy. And that was the fitrah. The whole intention was to keep you healthy, whether we're speaking about brain or whether we're speaking about your relationship. So it's not just speaking about keeping you healthy and away from dementia, but even for the younger generation, when they're hands on, all of those sensory all of those sensory things, they're going to be helping them, one, recognize and build that relationship with the things around them, and certainly giving even if it's a child, giving them that relationship while we're probably cooking together, we're talking, we are blending with something, we're taking the time to grow our patience. We're taking the time to grow our patience by simply recognizing that that dish, which we consume in probably 2 minutes, it took us almost an hour to do. Especially if you're talking about grape leaves, it's going to be one grape at a time, which it'll take you probably, well, I mean, it depends on how good you are and how fast you are, but it'll take you just a half a second if you really love grape leaves, to just eat it up. But it took you, well, it depends on how fast you are in making that grape leaf and stuffing it, but it definitely took you a lot longer to make it than eat it. But certainly, all of that blending is actually part of the fitrah. Silence is one thing I would say had been forgotten during our day and age in its importance to enhancing our fitrah. And you know what? Maybe I should use a different word than enhancing fitrah. Maybe I should say awakening our fitrah. And this is very important when we say awakening our fitrah, because when you look at the ayat, when it's talking about fitrah, considering that what acts as let's say an area that malfunctions the fitrah is ghafla. So if you're talking about ghafla, then you're talking about something that puts something to sleep. You're talking about a malfunction. You're talking about something that wears something off. So if you are going to use that word to understand what really happens to the fitrah, whether in a moment of seclusion, a moment of silence, a moment where you're just يتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض. They're just doing this type of dhikr. This type of dhikr is a type of internal dhikr. They're just thinking about خلق السماوات والأرض, about the creation, about nature, about the world, about all of that. That's a form of dhikr. That's a form of visual dhikr. And that's that silence, and what they would talk about in silence. You cannot just, be like a Tao person. You're just thinking and trying to reach the point of thinking of nothing. Absolutely not. It's not thinking of nothing, but it's actually thinking of the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by letting your brain and your eyes and your ears and your sensory basically connect with the things in nature. That's basically connecting you with the ground, the earth that you were created from. So that يتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا is also letting us know that that's part of our fitrah. That's part of what would awaken the fitrah and bring in that dhikr. And certainly, right now with the constant stimulation, TikTok, YouTube, music, notifications, and advertisements, the pop-ups, the games, all of that, that's not what the human mind was designed to have as something that is demanding their attention every few seconds. There were some interesting studies that were done on mice when they had these blinking lights and how it affected their sleep, it affected their eating habits, it affected their physical movements and all of these different things just by having these blinking lights. And that's the same thing. In order for you to have your phone work or your laptop, it's basically all of the time radiating this amount of light. And now we're seeing studies that are telling us that actually can cause something that is like a seizure without you realizing and without you necessarily seeing an actual seizure happening. But the brain is basically functioning in ways because of all the pop-up, because of all the ringtones, because of all these notifications. So one thing I would recommend is turning off the notifications on your phone. Just keep on turning on these notifications in order to make sure that you're not going to be stimulated with, and certainly not feeling that there's a demand that's bringing and wanting your attention every few seconds. So turn off those notifications to let you relax, and perhaps maybe even with ringtones, you probably just want to put maybe your husband or probably your children, maybe the ones to consider them as important, but all the others, maybe a moment of, hey, let me put it on, whether it's airplane mode or probably just a moment where you're taking out all, what's the other option? I think it was you're putting it that you're busy or something. There's something on the phone that basically
Do not
lets you.
disturb.
Do not disturb. There you go. Do not disturb mode. That basically helps you in order to just make a certain time that it's just a me time. It's just my, let's call it the fitra rejuvenation time. And this is very important. This is very, very important because what you are doing is a moment of dhikr. This is dhikr time. Dhikr time is not just a time where I'm doing subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. Dhikr time can also be that visual dhikr that we were talking about, can also be the time that you are just going around and walking around and just having that do not disturb time. It's my rejuvenation of fitra time. And it's my time to connect with my kids, connect with my mother, my family, in order to bring about a social dhikr. There's social dhikr as well. Yes, there's social dhikr, there's visual dhikr, there's oral dhikr, all of that. That's also part of what revives the fitra. You know, there's another thing, looking at the sky, because when you look at the hadith, certainly not during prayer. You're advised not to look at the sky during the prayer. And in fact, there are a lot of hadith that are authentic that actually talk about that. But looking at the sky, when we look at يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, whether you're looking at it or whether you're just thinking about it, that's part of the fitrah. So something as simple, sitting outside at night and looking at the stars, it can reconnect you with a sense of creation that's just very easy to lose in cities because of all the bright lights around there. So just having that natural human relations and fitra, just keep in mind that fitra isn't just physical, but it's also, it's a companionship. Just keep that one in mind. I guess we need to emphasize that one. We're going back, even though we said it before, but just keeping that one, I guess that one needs a special emphasis more than what I had just mentioned earlier. But we definitely need that companionship, whether it's with marriage, children, and we know that right now with feminism and with that LGBT and all of that, right now bonding with the same sex is actually right now encouraged, and you will have these areas that may use therapy, psychology, and I had said before, and I always say it, that those departments are hijacked by the LGBT. قولا واحدا. I will not, no one can convince me otherwise, because I know that for a fact. I was working closely with all the departments on a university campus, worked there for a couple years. I know for a fact that those areas are actually hijacked, infiltrated by the LGBT, by the liberals, by the atheist agenda. There's no way that I can think otherwise, because I know that from first hand and very close relations. And certainly, you know, what people on the outside don't recognize is what happens behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, that's where all that, let's say, cooking happens.
That's where all that cooking happens. And I was in the kitchen on university campuses, and I know what many do not know. Students, they just say, hey, it's classes, it's presented as it's an educational institution. Sorry, it is not. University campuses are not necessarily educational institutions. No, they're also institutions to be used by governments, by certain people that are coming with certain agendas to infiltrate those institutions in order to make these, whether smart minds or whether different minds, to basically be used in a certain paradigm, to basically function in a certain vision. So I will say, be careful with how you read universities and how you understand universities. Uh, be careful with the way that studies are presented. They may not necessarily be a study, and it can be some kind of a poison, but it basically was labeled as a study in order to make it something that you can consume, thinking that it is intelligent, it is smart, basically it is basically something that intelligent minds had discovered, and this isn't something that is shoved down into my throat. So be really careful with how you perceive all of that. And certainly, like I said, because I was on a university campus, that, and those conversations that happen behind closed doors, if you're not part of the staff, if you're not part of the faculty to really know who's funding what, how much money was funded, how much, and who's actually wanting us. And when they fund you, when they fund that university, they don't fund it just because, oh, they just want people to be smart. Absolutely not. There's certain agendas, there's certain organizations, there are certain people that will fund for 2 million, 3 million, 5, 25 million. You name them, you name the money, and they'll be wanting you. Yes, we want pro-Israel, let's say, classes, or we want to make sure that this is basically something that is inclusive if we're talking about LGBT. So they'll basically introduce classes because they want to make sure that that this money is going in, and they want to make sure that they're basically getting the funding. They want to make sure that those institutions are continuing. So they basically go into and do a business type of how do you sell basically this agenda. And at the same time, certainly they would the institution would buy it because they're having that benefit that the university campus is going and continuing. So if it means getting a funding of 25 or 30 million dollars, then yes, they'll take the 30 million dollars. What do you want? Oh, we want classes. We want the students to basically learn more about Israel. So they'll have basically the Hasbara project, or they'll probably have the campus watch looking out to make sure that this really is working in Israeli favor. But hey, there's also the LGBT, there's also the atheist agenda as well, and the list goes on and on. So then without you realizing, they'll be the ones to change. They'll be the ones to change the curriculum. They'll be the ones to introduce the curriculum, and they'll be the ones. So I wanted to also teach Islamic studies, but guess what? They have the curriculum that is supposed to go based on the Department of State, or the Secretary of State, and they'll be the ones. And certainly, we're talking about the government. They'll be the ones to determine how Islamic studies is taught. They'll be the ones to determine how history is taught. They'll be the ones to determine how people even teach even medicine, believe it or not, even medicine. At one point, it was called gender dysphoria. No, now we're going to be inclusive, and now it's a new set of infiltration. And if you dare to go outside, oh, you'll get your license taken away. You'll get unemployed. You will basically be told that you have to leave. So let's just be really careful about that. And certainly that's why Islam is teaching us how to be free minds and certainly not be consumed and certainly, let's say, abused in areas and hijacked in areas that we don't recognize. Okay, now, of course, part of that is creating, creating more isolated from the family. So we're talking about projects that the government itself or governments are actually finding ways to detach the children from the families in order for them to basically have that structure that they can control, whether in schools, universities, and certainly media. And without us realizing, we're seeing that the parents' involvement is not anymore with the children. And subhanAllah, when the children are away from their parents, put in daycares because, hey, the system requires that we create more needs than what we really need. So we're creating these wants and are becoming needs, and you're not doing the job like you used to before. Our bodies are getting weaker. Our relationships are getting weaker because, yes, we need to have this. The media is making it and creating more and more demand on what you really want. But the truth of the matter, you don't necessarily need all of that. So the first thing that I would say to heal your fitra is make sure you remove a lot of these items at home because they act as distractions. Try to keep your home very simple in the things that you have inside. Your pantry, try to cut down on the material that's in your pantry, because every single thing that's in your pantry is also meaning that there's all these preservatives, there are all these different chemicals in it, and certainly that's going to contaminate your body without you realizing. And maybe figure out and learn how to make it your own gardening, maybe make your own or depend on dried foods, or probably depend on organic fresh foods, whatever it is. But instead of using canned or using all these things that are in the pantry, or even all these candies, all of that, you probably want to learn how to get your fitra back into the fitra that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it in. And certainly sometimes, yes, doing things slowly, that's also another thing that will enhance the fitra, because of course, modern life is always encouraging fast foods, entertainment, instant messaging, instant purchases, in constant productivity. And certainly we're seeing that what humans need is basically to benefit from those periods where there's nothing to optimize. Just taking a moment of just doing things in a slow way to help you process all of that. And this doesn't mean that everything that is old-fashioned is necessarily automatically fitra. Let's just say that again. Not because it's old-fashioned, it doesn't mean that this is fitra. Islam doesn't say that modern technology, cars, electricity, and all of that are somehow inherently against fitra, but rather the problem is when our environment becomes so artificial that it works against the natural needs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed us in. So when we're talking about modern life, certainly gives us convenience, but sometimes it removes the conditions that our bodies, our minds, and our souls and our ruh was designed for. And certainly some of the things that people are just rediscovering today is that things all the things that we talked about: morning sunlight, spending time in nature, eating less processed food, reducing screen time, all of that, sleeping consistently, social connection and periods of silence. They're actually the right now the recommended methods that scientists are right now coming to tell us this, and this is what you actually need. And one thing, maybe this is something that we can easily do, but I will say there's another area, which is that social relationships, that social relationship piece of it. I would say there's another department that is fully infiltrated, whether it's a psychology department with a therapist and all of that. They're right now working in a different way, encouraging us to be isolated, living on your own. And certainly Islam tells you, well, no, you can't just live on your own. And the only time that you would move out is when you have a new companion. We're speaking about you're moving out because you're getting married. That's when you move out. Not that you move out simply because, yes, I just need some time where no one is overseeing my choices, and no one is giving me their recommendations, and no one's giving me their advice and pushing it onto me. But certainly those areas of the parental mentorship, brotherly, or the siblings basically coming in to give us these recommendations, that was the area that was enhancing one, our vision and how we saw things, and certainly are enhancing our social skills and how we relate with others. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. This is part of your fitrah, male, female. This is part of your fitrah. The way you deal with your brother is different than the way you deal with your sister. The boy's role in the family to basically give protection, to give security, to let him take responsibility. Oh, the curtains are open. You have to take responsibility. Make sure no one is seeing your sisters, or else you'll be a youth. Make sure that you are giving that protection. Hey, if we need to get something, you are the man of the household. You go and grab it instead of letting your sister go outside and actually be exposed, and etc. That's teaching that man how to build that masculinity. That's teaching him how to build that leadership position that is part of his fitrah. And we're seeing right now, of course, all those foods with all those different things containing all these chemicals that are making boys less masculine. And it's not just the food that's making the boys less masculine, but part of it is also the social behavior. Boys are playing less. Boys are activating their muscles less, and what we end up with is boys that are not men anymore. Boys not grown to being men, but right now we're seeing girls that are becoming manly and boys that are becoming feminine. We've got a problem. This is not fitrah. So certainly when we're speaking about such recommendations, and one thing I would say, another thing that I was getting very often, on those phone calls is men complaining that women want to go out more often, or want to work, and convinced that by working outside that's basically going to give her this autonomy and all of that. And that on the other hand, women complaining that their husbands are, they would use the word controlling, and not say, and even when it comes to raising the children. So the father would come in, and I would say pushing their children to do certain activities or certain jobs that for the mother, she would say that, oh no, this is not something that they're capable of doing. So the mother's coming in with the fitrah of affection, mercy upon her child, but the father comes in with the mindset that, no, I'm supposed to expose them to these areas that might be dangerous to you, but not until they recognize what is, not until they're exposed and they recognize what is dangerous, not until then will they be capable of getting stronger and being capable of building those muscles. And right now we're seeing specialists tell us that rough play is actually healthy. And same thing, I would say, sometimes ladies, I get this often, that women are seeing their husbands being controlling, that their husbands, they're too strict, that they're just too much into wanting everything to be in structure. And I would say, listen, that's his fitrah. His fitrah was made to put structure within the household. The fitrah of a man is to be a qawwam. Hey, why didn't you clean this? I expect this to be on time. I expect this to basically put things in structure. Certainly when mom is there, dad is not there, the kids are, jumping up and down, but then the dad comes in and boom, right there, everything's in structure. This is part of a man's fitrah. So ladies, do not get convinced by the therapist that this is controlling and that this isn't healthy for the kids, that the man is supposed to be just as a woman. Absolutely not. And there's one thing that you would see often is that what many women are told, that what it means to be a healthy father is that they're supposed to be contributing in the same way that a mother is contributing. And that's not necessarily the fitrah. That's not necessarily the fitrah. The mother, you contribute differently compared to what the father might contribute in. You might give this affection, you might give this bond, but the father may not necessarily do it this way. So that is, a subject where Islam will tell you that sometimes ladies give spaces to the husbands. At the same time, for the husband will say, hey, don't get involved in some of those womanly talks and those womanly areas, her kitchen, please don't get into her kitchen issues. That's her area. And sometimes just give her that space to organize and basically put everything in order as what she wishes. That's her space. You don't get involved in that. Give her that area to basically determine. If she wants to keep those dishes till tomorrow because she's so tired, well, yes, I understand that to you, no, everything has to be in order, but sometimes she has to consider certain priorities. So certainly, just giving that fitrah space, understanding a man's fitrah and understanding a woman's fitrah helps communication happen. And certainly when we're speaking about helping communications happen, we learn that communication skill with family, friends, companions, neighbors, community, marriage, children, the elderly. They're very important in our life. The elderly, Darwin considers that, hey, a woman, after she basically goes through menopause, that she basically dies out. But of course, that's not what Islam is telling us. That's why Islam is always emphasizing on respecting the elders. Respecting the elders. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said, he's not from us, the one that doesn't respect the elders. Why mention that? Because there's no way that you can learn from somebody if you do not respect them. Respecting them is a way that channels that you understand, that you honor, and that there's something that you honor about them, that's experience. And that history, there's no way that you can build a future if you don't know your history. Your future depends on your history. Grandparents, the elderly, are basically the key component of you, of your history, that basically give you that lens to learn how to build that future. And of course, when you're looking at modern life, modern life basically makes it possible, certainly, to know thousands of people, while in reality, and you know, being genuinely close to almost nobody. And you can have 1,000 followers on Instagram, but nobody to call when you're having a terrible day. That's why Islam was letting us know that as part of our fitrah, the family was supposed to be your primary social environment and the primary social, let's call it experiment, and let's call it the primary social area that would give you these skills to learn how to grow and how to develop your social skills. So when you're looking at people that are social, right now studies are letting us know that social people are more likely to be successful than people that are not social. Even though they may be book smart, they're probably the ones to be the doctors, the ones to probably be the A+ students and all of that, but the ones to be in that management are the ones that were probably in the B grade, because they were the ones that were doing two things, which is study some time and also engage in social lifetime. That social lifetime is not less important than that time that they would invest in reading and studying and all of that. So you might wake up and see the parents, siblings, grandparents, cousins, aunts, the uncles, the neighbors, all of them. Those were multiple generations. And I want you to look at that multiple generation piece of it. Because when you say multiple generations and coming from different areas, that's, yes, it's not that, oh, my aunt is interfering in something that is not her business. It's an area that she wasn't supposed to be. She wasn't asked to talk about it. Oh, yes, she is a part of you. You may not like the advice. You may not like her interference, but reaching out and hearing those thoughts, even if you dislike them, is part of you learning how to listen to ideas that you may dislike, how to deal with those ideas that with those ideas that you may dislike but still need to learn about them. You may need to also say those different types of people and learn how, hey, others were capable of having an influence on them, and how these people influence us in different ways, and how they're part of us, and how we still have to deal with them even if we don't like them. And yes, whether you're a CEO or no matter who you are, you're going to have to learn how to deal with people even if you do not like them. And right now, when you look at before, the first thing people would wake up to see is parents, siblings, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, etc. Right now, all you wake up is bedroom, school, work, car, screen, bedroom, that's it, and it goes on and on. And your family might even live in another city, another country, but Islam basically tells you that there's an important resource for enhancing and reviving your fitrah, which is silat al-rahim. Because maintaining these ties of kinship is also waking up that fitrah. Because relationships were not supposed to disappear simply because they're inconvenient. But we had to learn how to build these skills, even when things were not convenient. But we had to learn how to build these skills in dealing with these areas that are not convenient to us, and still maintain a connection with the relatives, whether visit them, help them, forgive them. And I'll say forgive them again, check up on them, even if you don't like them, but you have no option but to check up on them. You have no option but to, hey, give them these gifts, even if that was a tasbih from your umrah or whatever it is, because your auntie, she's going to ask you, where's my gift? And that was, to us in an American culture, hey, you asking where's my gift is rude. And I want you to look at the word rude and emphasize on that. because a lot of times what is described as rude can sometimes actually be put in the wrong area. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as rude. There's definitely something that is rude. There's no question about that. But oftentimes it is given as a description to the wrong people, to the wrong place. Sometimes that area of my auntie probably getting into my business, asking me questions, is a way to create a bond to help them know about you and help you also know that others do care. Even if you might say, she's not asking about me because she cares, she's just wanting to be nosy. She's just wanting to be nosy. I may agree with you that she's just wanting to be nosy, but you still don't have the option to do that qata' silat al-rahim, that qata' al-rahim, because you don't like her attitude. And sometimes these questions that people might ask you about are basically those areas that you might need to think about. You might need to consider. Sometimes auntie is telling me, hey, where's my gift? I was expecting a gift from you. What happens then that, oh, I was expecting a gift from you? It's basically to let you know you have to think about others and not just yourself and not just about immediate people. So now we see that generations have been separated, and certainly that's a very, very big loss in our social fitrah. And I'll say social fitrah, and just like there's a, let's call it the spiritual fitrah, there's the social fitrah, there's the food fitrah, there's the marriage fitrah, sexual fitrah. There are these areas that are considered as fitrahs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was definitely telling us about. Be a really interesting book to write about things like just about fitrah, to write about hygiene fitrah, social fitrah, fitrah in seclusion, fitrah in your social relations, marriage fitrah, sexual fitrah, food fitrah. What else? Appearance, beauty fitrah. That's an interesting one. Beauty fitrah, like what, when you look at beautification, where's that limit of fitrah? I mean, we see that Islam emphasizes on the piece that Iblis will say, وَلَأَمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلْيُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically lets us know that Iblis will use changing our appearance as a way to infiltrate our fitrah. This one's quite interesting because even the hadith, they do emphasize as braiding the teeth, tattooing, or probably changing the eyebrows, that's going against fitrah. It's quite interesting how changing the eyebrows, tattooing, and certainly the Hollywood teeth are right now the trend. Quite interesting. I wonder, there's a correlation between that. And of course, all that puffing up the lips and puffing up and enhancing different parts of the body, that's one thing that shaitan will use to contaminate the fitrah. But that's the trend. And that's supposed to make you feel happy with your appearance and comfortable with how people perceive you. So it would be really interesting to write a book on just the fitrah and what is the definition of human in Islam? What is the human psyche in Islam? It'd be really interesting to write a book like that. Okay. I know I talked a lot about all these different things. There's one thing that in social relations fitrah, things about family history, family drama, although it appears that, oh, it's just nothing but a headache, but it just teaches, while they're listening to drama, auntie said this, uncle said this, they responded, this is their vision, this is where they're wrong at, this is where they're right at, all of that. If they learn Islam, then they'll learn how to recognize these parameters and boundaries, how to apologize when you're wrong, how to recognize rights, responsibilities, borders, legislation. And this is very important because certainly children hearing all these dramas is going to help them build. Sometimes, certainly, it can build something evil in them. I'm not telling you to expose your kids to all the drama. Sometimes it can build, an evil thing in them. And it just recycles exactly all that toxic, I'll use it again, all that toxic behavior that they're seeing on the outside. And sometimes you would have to come in to mentor and say, well, this is what Islam says. So what you're then doing, you are learning Islam, and probably your children are asking you, well, what does Islam say in that regard? So now you're putting Islam in their life for them to recognize that in order to solve our problems, in order to learn how we see through the lens of Quran and Sunnah, we basically see through these dramas, but we start teaching these children how to read these dramas and how to solve them, basically using Islam as our foundation. So this is a reason to remain socially, basically in relations and socially intact with the relatives, because certainly this is what is going to give these children the training to help them, one, whether run their own business, or whether it's whatever job that they're getting into, or even be leaders within the society, or even just, hey, have a healthy marriage life, or even the responsibility that they have to engage in basically towards their children, and not just wait and think that others are supposed to be working for them, because all we're creating then is nothing but narcissist people that are feeling they're entitled and everyone is supposed to be working in their favor and in their service. Certainly, subhanAllah, it's pretty sad how we had become so distant and so separated. Allah al-Musta'an. We can talk about neighbors, we can talk about friendships, and we can speak about certainly the social relations that we're missing out on during our times. But I'll just end right there and talk about how physical presence definitely matters, learning how to use those facial expressions, the eye contact, the tone, how to work on the tone. Most problems, I would say maybe 70% of the problems between husband and wife is the voice tone. Voice tone gone wrong. The husband may have a point, or the wife may have a point in their criticism, but the voice tone is not necessarily revealing a type of a healthy criticism, but is probably reflecting nothing but a person that's putting down another person. The voice tone said it. 70 or 75% of the problems between husband and wife is a voice tone, is not learning the art of using a voice tone. The best and the most important thing that we can learn how to fix that voice tone actually comes with intention. If your intention is basically pure, that it is humble, that this intention is sincere, your voice tone will show it. If you are not sincere, you're trying to condescend the other person, your voice tone will show it. There's a pitch that you cannot deny. There's a pitch that you cannot deny that will be audible for the other person. And our brains are designed in ways to recognize, just by hearing the pitch, what's actually happening. Our brains, the pitch itself is something that we can certainly, let's call it decode. We can analyze, we can scrutinize, we can certainly take into some form of recognition. So even if you wanted to sound like you're giving me a sincere advice, your voice tone said nothing, but you were trying to put me down. Your voice said nothing, but that you were trying to put me down. You were trying to belittle me or belittle him or whatever it is. So working on that voice tone is very important. Working on that posture, learning how to put that posture in place, and the proximity is also very important. With that posture, you're learning basically how to keep yourself healthy. And certainly text messages, they cannot replace sitting next to somebody. They cannot replace all that communication. Even if you had so many on WhatsApp or whatever it is, Islam is always emphasizing the importance of a social bonding, whether in Hajj or whether during iftar during Ramadan, or probably during suhoor, when you're probably 50% dead and walking like a zombie just to take a few bites in order to, do your iftar for the rest of do your siyam for the rest of the day, etc. All of those, they're actually a bond that will give your fitrah that enhancement. Your fitrah was not at all designed to live in such separation. That's why things like visiting the sick, attending funerals, visiting relatives, attending the masjid, forgot about the masjid, attending the masjid and eating together, greeting people, shaking hands, that touch, that physical touch, and it's extremely important. Even teaching the children how to do eye contact. One thing I absolutely loved about Saudis, I must admit, I don't think I seen it in Saudis and Yemeni children, Saudi and Yemeni children, is that when these children, they're encouraged to speak like adults. So this maybe 7-year-old boy, he's a Yemeni boy or a Saudi boy, 7 years old, but then he's speaking like what it means to be a man, engaging in these social interactions and speaking in ways, and I think Egyptian boys as well, or Egyptian kids, I don't want to use, gender as one thing, but that area of learning how to interact. So I would say I had seen that in Egyptian kids, I had seen that in Saudi kids, I had seen that in Yemeni kids, and speaking like adults, even though they're only 7 years old, or probably even 4 and 5, but speaking as if they are adults. If somebody comes over, they're not socially shy to invite, to speak, to interact, to be in the presentation of someone. And this is beautiful. This is extremely beautiful. If these children learn how to act like adults and not be socially shy, then you're going to expect that this person is going to be a leader in the future, because they learn how to shake the hands and how to speak and how to express their opinions and how to do that eye contact and how to engage with the adults and how to read their behaviors and read when it's a dangerous zone, how to push back, how to stay, how to be courageous, how to stand strong, how to live that figure that is capable of even reading, I would say, farasa. What is farasa? Farasa is basically learning the trajectory of different things by looking at, let's call it hidden data. Hidden data, facial expressions, probably maybe human interaction with one another. You're reading what is behind the scenes, what normally people would not say. And we're definitely missing out on that because there's a certain rhythm in social life. There's a certain rhythm in how people would express. There's something that is, interesting in how we would engage in certain movements in our faces and in expressions. And of course, we're seeing all of that that right now AI is capable of reading certain things. Now we know that this is real. I used to read about this in the old books and about farasa and all of that. I used to think that was something that was nothing but fake. But we had seen that the people during al-Jahiliyyah even, that they had seen things that we had lost the ability to see. And now we need to depend on AI to see it. The people during Jahiliyyah, they were capable of figuring it out, seeing it, and they were calling it farasa. Whether it's using words and eloquence or whether it's seeing people and reading their social behavior, reading their motives, reading their psychological state and all of that, they were capable of reading it without using AI. They were capable of seeing what today we lost that skill. Was it their fitra being awakened? Was it their social skills basically being trained? What was it? So in other words, there's something that we need to work on enhancing in order to basically engage in an awakened fitra. So don't think of your grandmother as boring, but think of that boring conversation that she's talking to you in is that manuscript that was hidden away and that she's basically giving you all that information that you did not manage to see. So she's reading it for you, and she's basically giving you something that is about you in the future. She's coming to you from the future and not from the past. Your grandmother is coming to you from your future, not from the past. Your mother is not controlling, but your mother is loving. Your father is not a narcissist, but your father is a person that wanted to put structure within the household. Your brothers, they're basically the ones to care. Your siblings, etc., and the list goes on and on. That's how we're supposed to be seeing our social relations and not the other way around. But you won't be able to see that if your fitra was already contaminated with all those reels that are just constantly talking to you about narcissist people and all of that. All you're going to see is starting to see every single person as nothing but a narcissist. So maybe we need to enhance the way we see the world by putting in a new software. That software is right inside of you. You don't need to insert anything. You just need to remove all the things that had already contaminated it. So what does it mean to remove? You probably need to lessen the stuff in your house. Maybe you need to lessen those gadgets that you basically are using. Maybe you need to lessen these social media times. Maybe you need to lessen the food in your pantry. Maybe you need, the list goes on and lessening things in order to enhance other things. You're then going to say that, oh, there's not much in my pantry. Oh, now I'm capable of seeing the fruits and vegetables. Oh, there's only one option for me to eat. That's the only thing. Oh, I guess I got to munch on a carrot instead of going and getting a bag of chips. Maybe I need to replace it. Maybe instead of using all these different sugary things, maybe I need to use pure maple syrup. Yes, it's expensive, but hey, honey, maple syrup, hey, something healthy. Maybe I need to learn what my ancestors had known and we had forgotten. Maybe we need to revive our fitrah in order to remember that ayah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting us know what shaitan will use against us, which is by alternating our fitrah as a way to control our identity. Keep that one in mind. Because Iblis was actually, and I will order them to change their appearance, to change even the animals and even the animals' creation. So we're talking about, whether we're talking about livestock, we're talking about what they're consuming, their appearance, all of that, in a way for me to control their identity. And this is very important. This is a fitrah thing. So when you go back to your fitrah, whether in food, your social relations, all of that, what you are doing, you're basically enhancing your fitrah to be more awakened spiritually, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you, Sibghatullahi wa man ahsanu minallahi sibgha. That's it. It's basically the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constructed you. It's the natural foundation that you were constructed in, you were designed in. And that is exactly like you fixing your modem in order to connect to all that Wi-Fi to get that connection. That's the information is basically sent, which is basically the Quran and Sunnah. It's the information is sent. But if the modem, your heart, your fitrah is contaminated, is malfunctioning, then your vision, your hearing, your ability to process all of that, you're going to find yourself, it's not working. You're going to find it that it is completely foreign, and you're going to see yourself rejecting it. So part of that rejuvenation actually means that we need to reassess the area that we're putting ourselves in. We need to make sure that we're rejuvenating our fitrah by looking at the Quran and Sunnah and telling me, this is what you need to do. Be careful from all that infiltration that had contaminated your fitrah and your ability to reach out, to connect, to learn from, and to receive the data that is sent from that wahi. If you're not able to receive that wahi, then there's a problem with that modem inside of you. It's your qalb. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that ayah was letting us emphasize on that, hey, if they're not hearing the words, they're not seeing the evidence, they're not processing it in their heart, it's all these three areas. Those are the key resources to knowing the truth. Those are the key resources to help you see the truth, to help you hear the truth, to help you relate to the truth. And this is very important. When you're taking each and every single one of them as a key thing, then that is only when you will be capable of tasting the truth. How do you taste the truth? It's not a bite to take. You taste it because, remember, the Prophet ﷺ actually said in the hadith that whoever lowers their gaze on something that, of course, they would be tempted to see, but then they lower their gaze. when they lower their gaze, what happens? The Prophet ﷺ said, أَبْدَلَهُ اللَّهُ حَلَاوَةَ الْإِيمَانِ يَجِدُهَا فِي قَلْبِهِ. What did he use? He used the word حَلَاوَةَ الْإِيمَانِ. What is it, halawa? It's just that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if a person lowers their gaze, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place them the sweetness of iman that they will find in their heart. When you say sweetness, you're talking about a taste. We usually think of taste as only being in the taste buds, the tongue, the mouth, etc. But Islam is letting us know that there's actually a bigger area of tasting. Your body can taste the sweetness of faith, or even pain. You can taste pain. You can taste pain, and you can taste sweetness, and you can taste joy. But we would usually think of taste as only being in the tongue. That's very narrow. But taste is a sensory. Taste is a sensory, and it is not exclusive to the tongue sensory, because every single side of your body, and by the way, your skin is a second sensory, but that's not exclusive to it either, because there's another sensory in the heart. حلاوة الإيمان يجدها في قلبه. That's basically telling us that there is a sensory to taste in the heart. Maybe science needs to work on that to actually figure it out, where really the heart senses. Maybe there is a study, I have no idea. Do tell me if there is a sensory that tells us, but according to the hadith, it's telling me that there's a heart sensory to taste feelings. It's quite interesting. In order to enhance this sensory, you would have to avoid certain haram things. Maybe haram to look at, maybe haram to engage in, and that's what will enhance your sensory. Other than that, you're going to lose these sensories. They do exist, but they're basically not functioning. They do exist. It's not that they don't exist. All those sensories are there, but it's that, kind of like a muscle. If you don't work it out, it's basically going to not function anymore. It will harden. So you need to work out that muscle. And part of these muscles are, well, not a muscle, but part of these things that we need to work out are these sensories. Sensories of how to rethink that when I tell you something is haram, it's not that do's and don'ts, but it's actually something that Islam is telling you it will kill your sensory in tasting sweetness of faith. If you were to engage in that haram, it will kill your sensory. And it can revive your sensory. If you were to look at nature, you were to see all of that, it will revive a sensory that you probably did not see. Same thing if we're talking about all sensories, social sensory, of course, food intake sensory, social sensory, sexual sensory, all of those. That's why Islam was telling us that even with Qawm Lut, said, oh, that's going to kill that sexual sensory, not going to revive it. It's not going to revive it. And this is very important, that Islam is telling us that there's a fitra. You can either kill it or you can revive it, and you can empower it. And this is very important to talk about. It would be really, really interesting to actually write a book on that. Really interesting. I actually love the idea. Absolutely love the idea. You know what I'll do? I will stop right here. I know we didn't do tafsir, but Jazakallah khairan, a couple sisters, or Jazahumullah khairan, actually said that the part about fitra was not fully talked about. And I, like you could see, I still feel that there's a lot more to say, because I'm actually getting the idea of writing a book on that. I just thought about the idea. If you have any ideas or, things that I probably did not see about fitra, I would love to hear it. I would love to hear some of what you might, bring up on this topic. I know we didn't get to tafsir, but yeah. So go ahead, my friends. If there's anybody that would like to add something or probably bring something to my attention, about fitra, I would love to hear it. Absolutely love to hear it. Oh man, those butterflies of ideas on fitra, they're coming in, but that be really interesting to write a book on that, right? Really interesting. What have we lost in understanding the human psyche and understanding, well, the human psyche probably is their term, but our term is fitra. So maybe in order to make a book that's attractive, we can call it the human psyche slash fitra. I mean, you don't want to write slash fitra. Maybe we can see a different way of how we can find a good title for the book, The Human Psyche in Islam. Okay. Yeah, right. Any ideas? I'd love to hear it. Anybody that would like to say anything, go ahead, my friend.